The United Kingdom intends to withdraw from the European Union, a process commonly known as Brexit, as a result of a June 2016 referendum in which 51.9% voted to leave the EU. The separation process is complex, causing political and economic changes for the UK and other countries. As of September 2016, neither the timetable nor the terms for withdrawal have been established. In the meantime, the UK remains a full member of the European Union. The term Brexit is a portmanteau of the words British and exit. The possibility of withdrawal from the European Union has existed under Article 50 of the Treaty on European Union of EU member states since 2007. Article 50, which governs the withdrawal, however, has never been used before. The withdrawal must be in accordance with the member states' constitutional requirements, and uncertainty exists as to the constitutional requirements in the UK, unless extensions are agreed to unanimously by the Council of the European Union. The timing for leaving under the article is 2 years from when the UK gives official notice, but this official notice was not given immediately following the referendum in June 2016. The assumption is that during the 2-year window new agreements will be negotiated, but there is no requirement that there be new agreements. Some aspects, such as trade agreements, may be made difficult to negotiate by the EU until after Britain has formally left the EU. Withdrawal has been the goal of various individuals, advocacy groups, and political parties since the UK joined the European Economic Community, the predecessor of the EU, in 1973. Though continued membership of the EEC and the Common Market was approved in a 1975 referendum by 67.2% of votes. Background: the UK was not a signatory to the Treaty of Rome, which created the EEC in 1957. The country subsequently applied to join the organization in 1963, and again in 1967, but both applications were vetoed by the President of France, Charles de Gaulle, ostensibly because a number of aspects of Britain's economy, from working practices to agriculture, had made Britain incompatible with Europe, and that Britain harbored a deep-seated hostility to any pan-European project. Once de Gaulle had relinquished the French presidency, the UK made a third application for membership, which was successful. Under the Conservative Prime Minister Edward Heath, the European Communities Act 1972 was enacted. On 1 January 1973, the United Kingdom joined the EEC, or Common Market. The opposition Labour Party, led by Harold Wilson, contested the October 1974 general election with a commitment to renegotiate Britain's terms of membership of the EEC and then hold a referendum on whether to remain in the EEC on the new terms. 1975 referendum. In 1975, the United Kingdom held a referendum on whether the UK should remain in the EEC. All of the major political parties and mainstream press supported continuing membership of the EEC. However, there were significant splits within the ruling Labour Party, the membership of which had voted 2-1 in favour of withdrawal at a one-day party conference on the 26th of April 1974. Since the cabinet was split between strongly pro-European and strongly anti-European ministers, Harold Wilson suspended the Constitutional Convention of Cabinet collective responsibility and allowed ministers to publicly campaign on either side. 7 of the 23 members of the cabinet opposed EEC membership. On 5 June 1975, the electorate were asked to vote yes or no on the question, "Do you think the UK should stay in the European Community?" Every administrative county in the UK had a majority of yes, except the Shetland Islands and the Outer Hebrides. In line with the outcome of the vote, 67.2% in favour favour of staying in the United Kingdom remained a member of the EEC. Between referendums, the opposition Labour Party campaigned in the 1983 general election on a commitment to withdraw from the EEC. It was heavily defeated as the Conservative government of Margaret Thatcher was re-elected. The Labour Party subsequently changed its policy. As a result of the Maastricht Treaty, the EEC became the European Union on 1 November 1993. The new name reflected the evolution of the organization from an economic union into a political union. The Referendum Party was formed in 1994 by Sir James Goldsmith to contest the 1997 general election on a platform of providing a referendum on the UK's membership of the EU. It fielded candidates in 547 constituencies at that election and won 810,860 votes, 2.6% of total votes cast. It failed to win a single parliamentary seat as its vote was spread out, losing its deposit in 505 constituencies. The UK Independence Party, a Eurosceptic political party, was also formed in 1993. It achieved third place in the UK during the 2004 European elections, second place in the 2009 European elections and first place in the 2014 European elections, with 27.5% of the total vote. This was the first time since the 1910 general election that any party other than the Labour or Conservative parties had taken the largest share of the vote in a nationwide election. In 2014, UKIP won 2 by-elections, triggered when the sitting Conservative MPs defected to UKIP and then resigned. These were the first elected MPs. At the 2015 general election, UKIP took 12.6% of the total vote and held one of the 2 seats won in 2014. The term Brexit is a portmanteau of Britain and exit. It was derived by analogy from Grexit, referring to a hypothetical withdrawal of Greece from the Eurozone. The term Brexit may have first been used in reference to a possible UK withdrawal from the EU by Peter Wilding in a Euractiv blog post on 15 May, 2012. 2016 referendum. In 2012, Prime Minister David Cameron rejected calls for a referendum on the UK's EU membership, but suggested the possibility of a future referendum to gauge public support. According to the BBC, the Prime Minister acknowledged the need to ensure the UK's position within the European Union had the full-hearted support of the British people, but they needed to show tactical and strategic patience. Under pressure from many of his MPs and from the rise of UKIP, in January 2013, Cameron announced that a Conservative government would hold an in-out referendum on EU membership before the end of 2017, on a renegotiated package, if elected in 2015. The Conservative Party unexpectedly won the 2015 general election with a majority. Soon afterwards, the European Union Referendum Act 2015 was introduced into Parliament to enable the referendum. Despite being in favour of remaining in a reformed European Union himself, Cameron announced that Conservative ministers and MPs were free to campaign in favour of remaining in the EU or leaving it, according to their conscience. This decision came after mounting pressure for a free vote for ministers. In an exception to the usual rule of cabinet collective responsibility, Cameron allowed cabinet ministers to campaign publicly for EU withdrawal. In a speech to the House of Commons on the 22nd of February 2016, Cameron announced a referendum date of the 23rd of June 2016 and set out the legal framework for withdrawal from the the European Union in circumstances where there was a referendum majority vote to leave. Citing Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, Cameron spoke of an intention to trigger the Article 50 process immediately following a leave vote under the two-year time period to negotiate the arrangements for exit. Campaign groups. The official campaign group for leaving the EU was Vote Leave. Other major campaign groups included Leave EU, Grassroots Out, and Better Off Out, while non-EU-affiliated organisations also campaigned for the United Kingdom's withdrawal, such as the Commonwealth Freedom of Movement organisation. The official campaign to stay in the EU, chaired by Stuart Rose, was known as Britain Stronger and Europe, or informally as Remain. Other campaigns supporting remaining in the EU included Conservatives in, Labour in for Britain, #In Together, Greens for a Better Europe, Scientists for EU, Environmentalists for Europe, Universities for Europe, and Another Europe is Possible. The result was announced on the morning of the 24th of June. 51.9% voted in favour of leaving the European Union and 48.1% voted in favour of remaining a member of the European Union. Political effects. The political scene in the UK went through substantial change and shock after the referendum. After the result was declared, Cameron announced that he would resign by October. In the event, he stood down on the 13th of July, with Theresa May becoming Prime Minister. George Osborne was replaced as Chancellor of the Exchequer by Philip Hammond. Boris Johnson was appointed Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs, and David Davis became Secretary of State for exiting the European Union. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn lost a vote of confidence among his parliamentary party and a leadership challenge was launched, while on the 4th of July, Nigel Farage announced his resignation as head of UKIP. Outside the UK, many Eurosceptic leaders celebrated and expected others to follow the UK example. However, opinion polls a week after the Brexit vote showed strongly increased support for the EU in most of Europe. The right-wing Dutch populist Geert Wilders said that the Netherlands should follow Britain's example and hold a referendum on whether the Netherlands should stay in the European Union. However, opinion polls in the fortnight following the British referendum show that the immediate reaction in the Netherlands and other European countries was a decline in support for Eurosceptic movements. Petitions for a new referendum. Within hours of the results announcement, a petition calling for a second referendum to be held in the event that a result was secured with less than 60% of the vote non a turnout of less than 75% attracted tens of thousands of signatures. The petition had actually been started before the referendum by someone favouring an exit from the EU. It attracted more than 4 million signatures, meaning it was considered for debate in Parliament. On the 27th of June 2016, David Cameron's spokesperson stated that holding another vote on Britain's membership to the European Union was not remotely on the cards. Home Secretary Theresa May made the following comment when announcing her candidacy to replace Cameron as Conservative leader on the 30th of June. The campaign was fought, and the public gave the verdict. There must be no attempt to remain inside the EU, and no second referendum. Brexit means Brexit. The petition was rejected by the government on the 9th of July. Its response said that the referendum vote must be respected, and that the government must now prepare for the process to exit the EU. The Commons Petitions Committee has scheduled a debate on the petition for the 5th of September 2016. Article 50, and the procedure for leaving the EU. Article 50 of the Treaty on European Union provides an invocation procedure whereby a member can notify the European Council and there is a negotiation period of up to 2 years, after which the treaties cease to apply, although a leaving agreement may be agreed by qualified majority voting, as was the case with the Scottish independence referendum 2 years earlier. The 2016 referendum did not directly require the government to do anything in particular. It does not require the government to initiate or even schedule the Article 50 procedure, although Cameron stated during the campaign that he would invoke Article 50 straight away in the event of a Leave victory. He refused to allow the civil service to make any contingency plans, something the Foreign Affairs Select Committee later described as an act of gross negligence. Following the referendum result, Cameron announced that he would resign before the Conservative Party conference in October, and that it would be for the incoming Prime Minister to invoke Article 50. A negotiation with the European Union will need to begin under a new Prime Minister, and I think it is right that this new Prime Minister takes the decision about when to trigger Article 50 and start the formal and legal process of leaving the EU. There is no established formal process for holding a second referendum to confirm the decision to leave following negotiations. Alan Renwick of the Constitution Unit of University College London argues that Article 50 negotiations cannot be used to renegotiate the conditions of future membership, and that Article 50 does not provide the legal basis of withdrawing a decision to leave. The UK government has stated that they would expect a leave vote to be followed by withdrawal, not by a second vote. As long as the UK government has not invoked Article 50, the UK stays a member of the EU must continue to fulfill all EU-related treaties, including possible future agreements, and should legally be treated as a member. The EU has no framework to exclude the UK, or any member, as long as Article 50 is not invoked, and the UK does not violate EU laws. However, if the UK were to breach EU law significantly, there are legal provisions to discharge the UK from the EU via Article 7, the so-called nuclear option, which allows the EU to cancel membership of a state that breaches fundamental EU principles, a test that will be hard to pass. Article 7 does not allow forced cancellation of membership, only denial of rights such as free trade, free movement and voting rights. Various EU leaders have said that they will not start any negotiation before the UK formally invokes Article 50. Jean-Claude Juncker even ordered all members of the EU Commission not to engage in any kind of contact with UK parties regarding Brexit. Media statements of various kinds still occur. For example, on the 29th of June, European Council President Donald Tusk told the UK that they would not be allowed access to the European single market unless they accept its four freedoms of goods, capital, services, and people. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said, "We'll ensure that negotiations don't take place according to the principle of cherry-picking. It must and will make a noticeable difference whether a country wants to be a member of the family of the European Union or not." Immediately afterwards, Cameron declared his belief that the next Prime Minister should activate Article 50 and begin negotiations with the EU. During the 27th of June 2016 meeting, the Cabinet decided to establish a unit of civil servants, headed by senior Conservative Oliver Letwin, who would proceed with intensive work on the issues that will need to be worked through in order to present options and advice to a new Prime Minister and a new cabinet. After a debate about the planned UK exit on the 28th of June 2016, the EU Parliament passed a motion calling for the immediate triggering of Article 50. Although there is no mechanism allowing the EU to invoke the article, newly appointed PM Theresa May made it clear that negotiations with the EU required a UK-wide approach. Speaking in Scotland on 15 July 2016, May offered the following comment: "I have already said that I won't be triggering Article 50 until I think that we have a UK approach and objectives for negotiations. I think it is important that we establish that before we trigger Article 50. Lawyers disagree on whether the Prime Minister can invoke Article 50 by royal prerogative, or whether there needs to be an explicit act of Parliament to invoke it." Three distinct groups of lawyers, one crowd-funded, are suing the government, are planning to sue it to make sure Article 50 is not invoked without a parliamentary act. Scottish Parliament objection. The First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, stated that Scotland might refuse consent for legislation required to leave the EU, though some lawyers argue that Scotland cannot block Brexit. 2 days after her appointment as PM, Theresa May travelled to Edinburgh to meet with Sturgeon, to reinforce the bond between Scotland and the rest of the UK. After the meeting at Bute House, May offered the following comment about Scotland's role in the negotiations about the UK's exit from the EU. "I'm willing to listen to options, and I've been very clear with the First Minister today that I want the Scottish Government to be fully engaged in our discussion." On the 19th of July 2016, at a preliminary High Court hearing of a challenge to the government's claim that it could issue the Article 50 notification without parliamentary approval, lawyers for the government confirmed that the Prime Minister would not issue any such notification before the end of 2016. Nicholas J. Fursley of the World Pensions Council has argued that it could be in Britain's national interest to proceed slowly in the coming months. The British government may want to push Brussels to accept the principles of a free trade deal before invoking Article 50, hopefully gaining support from some other member states whose economy is strongly tied to the UK, thus allowing a more nimble union to focus on the free trade of goods and services without undue bureaucratic burdens, modern antitrust law and stronger external borders, leaving the rest to member states. Prime Minister Theresa May made it clear that discussions with the EU would not start in 2016. "I want to work with the European Council in a constructive spirit to make this a sensible and orderly departure," she said. "All of us will need time to prepare for these negotiations, and the United Kingdom will not invoke Article 50 until our objectives are clear." Quote. In a joint press conference with May on the 20th of July, Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel supported the UK's position in this respect. "We all have an interest in this matter being carefully prepared, positions being clearly defined and delineated. I think it is absolutely necessary to have a certain time to prepare for that." According to the Daily Telegraph, the Department for Exiting the European Union spent over £250,000 on legal advice from top government lawyers in 2 months and has plans to recruit more people. Nick Clegg said the figures showed the civil service was unprepared for the very complex negotiations ahead.